Update: my father refused to walk me down the aisle because his adored daughter had an opening party that day. But he called me desperate when I got a replacement. Part 2: Robbie and I recently got engaged. We got married while we were hiking to our usual spot to watch the sunrise, and it was a dream proposal. It was so sweet to see how nervous I was when I was asked the question, and I had no hesitation in my mind when I accepted the proposal. I posted pictures of my engagement on my Instagram and also informed my family about it. They were so happy for me and congratulated us on our future. The news must have spread because my parents called me out of nowhere and congratulate me. I thought it was just a casual conversation, as we hadn't spoken for years. They asked me about my life, my work, and my apartment before my dad directly asked me if he could walk me down the aisle. I was surprised by his sudden question, as a few moments before, I didn't even know what company he worked for. I told him that I hadn't thought about it yet, and my dad told me it would be embarrassing if I didn't invite him and that others would question us about it, so it would be better if he walked me down the aisle. I told my parents that I didn't even know if I was going to invite them to my wedding, since we hadn't been in contact. This upset my parents. My mother began to tell me how disappointed she was with my answer, emphasizing the importance of family and tradition. She continued telling me how my parents would always be there for me, no matter what, and that I should leave the past behind. Part of me was tempted to listen to my parents and accept my dad's offer because I wanted our relationship to be repaired. But another part of me was fearful of opening myself up again to possible disappointments and hurt. However, I was about to start a new chapter in my life in a few months, so I told him I contacted my dad, who could walk me down the aisle, and he seemed thrilled. During the wedding preparations, I contacted my friends from high school, with whom I had always maintained contact despite the physical distance that had grown between us due to our careers. I told them how I wanted the group to get together, and that I wanted them to be my bridesmaids. There were many expressions of happiness and congratulations, and without hesitation, they accepted my invitation to be part of my wedding party, as it was an opportunity to get all together again. We all planned to go to Las Vegas to celebrate my bachelorette party, while Rob had a separate bachelor party with his friends. My friends and I posted a lot of pictures of the party, and in general, they all had a great time. However, when I returned home, my parents called me to let me know how disappointed they were that I had not invited Vicky to be part of the celebration. I told them that there was no way I would have involved Vicky in my bachelorette party, and that I didn't want her to be part of my life. This surprised my parents, and they asked me what I meant, so I clarified that Vicky's actions, particularly her history of lies and gossip, had left me deeply hurt and distrustful of her intentions. I could not imagine inviting her to such an intimate occasion as my bachelorette party, knowing that her presence would make my party less enjoyable. I also informed my parents that this was the reason why she was not invited to my wedding either. Hearing this, my parents complained that I had no right to exclude my sister from my wedding, and that it was my duty as her sister to include her in such important events. They told me that Vicky was excited to meet me after learning that I was getting married. I was confused and asked my parents who gave them that idea, since we hadn't even talked to each other for a long time, but my parents ignored my concerns, saying that this was not how sisters should behave. I told them they had to understand that my relationship with Vicky is complicated after all that has happened, and I just don't feel comfortable having her as part of my wedding, especially since she has never apologized to me for everything she put me through. However, my parents generally ignored my words. My mother kept saying how she wanted everything to be worked out, and that I should make an effort to invite Vicky. My father insisted that our relatives would talk about why my sister was not invited, and that this would end up affecting my wedding. However, I knew it was better not to give in to their demands, so I didn't give in. I told them it was okay for people to talk behind my back and question my character, as long as I was surrounded by people I liked and trusted during my wedding. My mother then asked if my fiancé would be fine with this and also tried to use the in-laws angle, suggesting that they would judge me for being so incredibly cruel as to exclude my own sister from my wedding. I laughed and informed my parents that my fiancé and my in-laws knew the dynamics of my family and that none of them would care if Vicky was present or not. I was pressured to reconsider, with suggestions about the importance of family unity and forgiveness. But I didn't give even an inch, as I was not willing to compromise my own well-being for the sake of appeasing others. In the end, we agreed to disagree, each of us clinging to our own perspectives. My parents told me they needed to think things over, and we ended our conversation. I briefed my fiancé about this because I felt a little guilty about confronting my parents, and he fully supported me. He told me that I shouldn't be forced to invite anyone I didn't want there, and that my parents, as usual, were trying to make me feel guilty. Since this conversation, I have felt a little better about my decision, and have been distracted by the wedding preparations as my wedding is fast approaching. Last week, my dad called me to inform me that he had thought long and hard, and that he and Mom would no longer be attending the wedding. Before I could react, he went on to say that this also meant that he would not walk me down the aisle. I asked him if there was a specific reason, and he informed me that Vicky would be moving to a new location soon, which my parents had helped her find. Since I was going to exclude her from the wedding, she had decided to throw a housewarming party that same day, so they would attend that instead of my wedding. I couldn't believe what my father was telling me because I wasn't being invited in the first place, let alone being walked down the aisle. But he insisted it was his decision not to do so. My own sister's housewarming party had priority over my wedding, which was a hard blow and a continuation of what I had felt for years. I just told him I understood and hung up the call. Though I tried to act brave in front of my father, deep down the pain of rejection affected me. When I told Rob, I was furious at how insensitive my parents could be after they were the ones who insisted on being invited. He gave me the idea that I should ask my grandmother, as she and Grandpa were more present in my life than my parents. I agreed, so I called them and asked if they would be willing to walk me down the aisle at my wedding. I couldn't hold back my emotions as I asked my grandmother. "You and Grandpa have always been there for me," I said, my voice cracking with emotion. "You have been more than just support. You have been like parents to me, and I cannot imagine anyone else I would want by my side on my wedding day." My grandmother didn't even hesitate before saying yes. She told me how honored she would be to walk me down the aisle, and unlike my parents, she wouldn't disappoint me. Her words soothed me, and at that moment I felt a deep sense of peace. With them by my side, I knew I had a family that loved me unconditionally and accepted me with all my imperfections. I also talked to my father-in-law about this, and Rob's parents assured me that they didn't care if my parents didn't attend, and that regardless of their presence, they were happy to witness and support our union. My wedding is in 2 days, and today I woke up to several missed calls from my dad. I called him back, thinking it was an emergency. When he answered, he asked if it was true that my grandmother would walk me down the aisle. I said yes, it was true. Then my dad got angry, saying how disrespectful it was to have asked my grandmother. I reminded him that he was the one who decided not to come to my wedding, so I didn't understand why he was so upset. My dad continued yelling at me about how he and Mom were just trying to make me see the error of my actions, and that they thought by declining the invitation they would teach me a lesson. He went on to say how he and Mom had raised me and paid for my food and education, so my grandmother had no right to replace him. I tried to reason with him by explaining that my grandparents had been there for me in ways he and Mom never were, but he wouldn't listen. He also told me that I had done nothing but push everyone away from me and that it was all my fault. I don't think I've done anything wrong in this situation. I understand everyone would have done the same, but since the subreddit requires me to ask the question, am I the bad guy for asking my grandmother to walk me down the aisle instead of my father? Update 1. Many people agreed that I was not in the wrong. I received a lot of advice and suggestions on how to deal with this situation. I agree that I need to permanently cut off contact with my parents because their constant indecision is exhausting and is beginning to affect my mental health. I don't want them in my life when they have consistently shown that Vicky is always their first priority. First of all, yes, my wedding was quite good with my grandmother by my side as I walked down the hallway. Despite the absence of my parents, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness when exchanging vows with Rob, committing to spend the rest of our lives together. My friends and I danced all night, and I can't begin to describe how important it is to stay in touch with your childhood friends no matter what, because sometimes they are your chosen family. During the reception, I felt a slight pain realizing that my parents were not there to share this special moment, especially when I saw Rob's parents and cousins giving speeches for him. However, I take comfort in the knowledge that I made the right decision for myself by prioritizing my own well-being and happiness. Some of my friends gave speeches sharing memories of our experiences and the bond that had supported us both in good times and bad. In the days following the wedding, Rob and I went on a honeymoon that his parents had paid for as a wedding gift. I spent all my days just relaxing and enjoying myself with my husband. I feel so excited every time I look at Rob and realize he is now married to me. As I mentioned earlier, I cut off all contact with my parents by blocking them everywhere. I didn't bother to send them an explanation because, frankly, they don't even deserve it. I have no idea if Vicky really had a housewarming party that day, or if it was just an excuse for my parents not to attend my wedding, but at this point, I don't care. I wish them and their beloved daughter nothing but the best. Update 3. I didn't intend to share more after my last update, but something unexpected just happened, and I think you all deserve to know. I hadn't checked my email in the last month due to my wedding and honeymoon, but today, while I was checking emails, I found an email from Vicky. I don't even know how she found my email address, and was completely surprised. I doubted whether to open her email or just delete it without reading it. But as the saying goes, curiosity killed the cat. Inside was an extensive message from Vicky expressing her regret for our strained relationship and her desire to reconcile. Recognizing the mistakes she had made in the past, admitting that she had been selfish and immature. Vicky apologized for the pain she had caused me over the years and expressed a genuine desire to make amends. She continued to write how happy she feels about me now that I am married and that she wishes me nothing but the best. I received the email begging me not to punish my parents by cutting them off and that they missed me. Reading her words, I felt a mixture of emotions, surprise, and skepticism. Part of me wants to believe that Vicky has really changed, that she is sincere and willing to work to repair our relationship. But another part of me is still doubtful because this seems too good to be true. However, regardless of what she wrote, I know for sure that my parents do not miss me because if they did, they would not have treated me like that all these years. I thought of sending her an answer, but then I decided not to. After all, forgiveness is not something to rush. It's a process that requires time and reflection. I still don't know if I want to have a relationship with her again. I could forgive her, but that doesn't mean we're finally going to be sisters now. To be honest, after my marriage, I no longer feel alone. I have learned to acknowledge that I have my loving husband by my side, supportive friends, and unwavering love from them. With their support, I know I can face any challenge that comes my way without meeting Vicky or my parents in my life. I have also researched and found a good therapist with whom I have booked my first appointment. I have taken this step to address and resolve any wounds from my past and heal from them. Update 4. I think I did well not to answer the email I mentioned in the last update, because now everything comes to light. It turns out that Vicky did not write anything, and that it was my parents using her account. That's why they were so emphatic that I would forgive my parents, because they were the ones who had written it. I know because I happened to meet Vicky one day, and when I greeted her, she looked at me with a disgusted face like she always did. I commented to her about the email, thinking my lack of reply was the problem, and she told me that she had not sent me anything. She took out her phone and found the email in the sent mail tray, but swore that she had not written anything at that time. We both realized who the author was since surely some computer in the house still had Vicky's session open. I also asked her about the housewarming party, and she told me that it had not happened. So as I suspected, it was all a lie from my parents. Then we each went our own way, and that was all. Honestly, I don't know who was worse in my life, my sister or my parents, because at this point, my parents are already too twisted. At least now, everyone will know because I made a post on my Instagram with links to my Reddit stories, so all the family and people close by are reading this story. If you are liking it, follow us for more stories.